You are now listening to The Project. Where we stop at nothing to bring you the right facts on health, fitness, and psychology. Featuring some of the world's most experienced professionals so you can learn, lift, and live. With your hosts, Meg, Dr. D, and Mehdi. I personally think there's a right way to yell at your kids, and there's a completely wrong way to yell at your kids. There's the way of, when DJ does something like, dude, chill out, man. What's wrong with you, buddy? You got to settle down. You can't do that. That's how I react. Then there are the parents like, oh my God, what is wrong with you? Is there something wrong with you? Are you stupid? That drives me up the wall because it's like, dude, if you're calling your kid stupid, you're fucking stupid too. Because you're the person who raised them.
If I heard that parent do that, my jaw would drop. Like, that's not the yelling I'm okay with. Like, I might go up to them. I'm one of those guys. I'm that guy that would be like, hey, man, this is not cool. And honestly, if they're doing that in the store, what are they doing at home?
What I teach parents is like, look, they're going to do bad behaviors, yes. And that bad behavior should be recognized as bad. Not that you are stupid. The behavior you did was not a good behavior. It's not something we do in this household. So always qualifying the behavior. So that way the kid doesn't grow up believing they're stupid or they're crazy or that there's something wrong with them. So I think this is what a lot of these kids that suffer from low self-confidence or depression or even suicidal thoughts come from the idea that I'm not loved.
All this and more in today's episode. Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of The Project, Psyched with Dr. D, back at it again, and we are happy to introduce Jason Tieri. Tieri? Or did I screw that
Tieri,
up? Tieri.
Okay.
Tieri. I screwed that up. I always do that.
I do the same.
Isn't it the worst when you ask the name beforehand so you don't screw it up, and then you botch it, and it's like, oh, man.
You still screw it up, Mehdi.
I know. I'll leave it to you next time, Dr. D.
No, you do a good job. I don't think I need to introduce. But anyways, Jason, thank you. Welcome. So for our listeners, we wanted to have Jason just talk a little bit about your experience, your childhood, and then, all the experiences that you have.
Jason, if you don't mind, let me preface this real quick. Jason is a sufferer of childhood abuse for the listeners. And the reason why we're bringing him on the show is mainly because we all know in the Middle East and certain parts of the world, there's no awareness to abuse, especially amongst children. So, Jason, welcome. Thank you for coming on to share your story. We really appreciate it here on Psyched with Dr. D.
Yes, thank you very much. I super appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. I'm 44, almost 45 in a couple of weeks, and I grew up in Western Michigan. If for people that are listening, it's conservative, mostly middle class. And when I was growing up, I went to private school, Christian school, and I experienced quite a bit of child abuse. Being the older of the three kids in the house, it was me and then two sisters. My sisters experienced some of the physical part, but mostly emotional, and I took the brunt of the physical abuse. I have not the greatest memory of a lot of that, and I'm currently working with a therapist. We're going to start some EMDR, but I can't do that via telehealth. I just won't do it because I need to be in person. So that's on pause right now. But yeah, so I'm hoping that through EMDR, I can remember some of that stuff, even though I don't want to. But yeah, I was physically abused as early as I can remember. And then it stopped about 13 years of age when I was physically able to stop it. I had a dad in the home, but he was neglectful, just basically kind of told me that he didn't see it and it didn't happen when he was around, which is not true. And he never really stopped it. And, we were the typical American family, right? You go to church on Sunday and go to Christian school. But in the meantime, I was getting my ass kicked. My mom grew up in an abusive home with 5 other sisters. Her mom, my grandmother, terrible woman, used to try to kill herself in front of the kids. And so not that I'm excusing my mom's actions, but this is how it happens, right? This is this cycle that keeps going down and down. So my goal as an adult was trying to get myself fixed up. And over the last 10 years, I've worked on it, but my 20s and early 30s were pretty rough in my adult life. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Just out of curiosity, where did it lead to in your 20s and your 30s? I mean, I grew up in an abusive home also. My father used to abuse my older brother. He was the oldest boy. My brother DJ, God rest his soul, he took the brunt of all the beatings. I did something wrong, DJ's getting his ass beat. My sister does something wrong, DJ's getting his ass beat. So, where did things turn to the worst for you? I knew I had a rough late teen years. Luckily, I cleaned up my act a little bit and I got on the right track with the help of Dr. D, of course, when I was in college. She helped me get rid of a lot of the anger issues that I was bottling up, but I could have gone one of two ways back then. So where did it go for you, man? What was the highs? What was the lows?
I didn't have anything where I would get in trouble like by the law or anything, but I had trouble with relationships. I couldn't keep a job. I would, someone would say something and I would blow up at them, and I still am working on that now, but it was anger. Anger was what triggered me and that's how I expressed my issues. Let's say I didn't get depressed. I didn't get lonely. I just had anger. So lost a lot of jobs, lost a lot of relationships. My wife now, I've been married twice, is the first positive female role model I've had in my life is my wife that we've been married for 15 years. But before that, I was married before that. She was terrible. Again, I was part of that too. So I always try to preface that because I don't want people to think I'm bashing my ex-wife. She was terrible. Don't get me wrong, but I did stuff too. But my point is not having a strong female role model. My girlfriend before, it was okay. It just struggled in relationships. And even now I do struggle even with my male friends and just not being able to sometimes saying things that are just asshole. And they're like, why did I say that?
So obviously sounds like trust was a big issue for you, right? No,
Yes.
And also what we were saying is that mom was the abusive one and dad pretending like that didn't exist. And then of course the contradiction that I'm in a Christian school, I go to church, which, religion doesn't really promote abuse, but then it was justified in your home. That's what you're saying.
Yeah. And people do not understand how important a parent is raising your kids. Dude, it means the world to not hit your kids. It sounds pretty obvious to us, right? Sitting here, but people don't realize it. And I have broken that cycle. I have not abused my kids. I have 3 kids, one who's 24, one who's 13, and one who's 10. So I didn't abuse my kids. Now my oldest is dealing with some stuff because of the divorce and my issue with my first wife because it was not healthy. But just, man, if anyone could take away from anything, you don't realize those people that you're raising, they're going to be great adults if you can do the best job you can of, being a parent.
So Jason, in taking it from there, why do you think parents shouldn't be beating their kids? Well, tell us about your experience in regards to mental health. What does it really do to a kid?
So going back to discipline, you may be surprised by this. I think it's okay to spank your kids. Even though that I was abused, I think there's a time and a place for that. If my kid runs in the street, I'm going to spank them. And I did. I spanked my kids. And then they knew, oh, this is, I'm not going to put them in timeout for running in the street. I'm sorry. That's not impactful enough. And it's dangerous. Now, obviously, if they spill a milk, you don't beat your kid, at the table. So your question was can you repeat that again? Sorry, I got sidetracked.
For the parents that are listening, especially in this part of the world, maybe there is a lot of justification. And from people that I see that it's okay to hit your kid. And what I hear from a lot of parents is well, I was hit. I've turned out okay. Why is it that I can't hit my kid? And I think for you going through it as the kid, what damage did it do to you? What impact does it have had on you that parents should be aware of?
Well, one of the things that I've experienced through therapy is the brain wiring, as you know, and it's so fascinating to me, that wiring, when my therapist talks about that. At first I was like, this is quack talk. I totally don't get it, but it rewires a kid's brain when it does that. And the mental health that I've, like I said, experienced in my 20s and 30s is just relationships are super hard. And that's been the worst part. It's an act of God that I didn't beat my kids. I don't know how I didn't, during the 20s, and I wasn't going to therapy, and it's just amazing that I didn't. But yeah, I think you don't realize how much you're messing that kid up. And there's someone that says like you said, how the parent says, well, I was beat, and I turned out fine. But did you turn out fine? Is that just your opinion? Or let's talk about the people in your life and see if you did turn out fine. So yeah, it's super impactful when you hit your kid. Hitting your kid like I said, I'm okay with the discipline and the spanking. I mean, once you start hitting a kid in the head, and I got rough stuff, like kicked in the chest, beat with hairbrushes, slammed against the wall. Like that's just too far. And you're definitely messing your kid up when you do that.
No, that makes sense. I mean, I got hit by my parents, my mom and my dad. My mom, again, she used to spank us until I started laughing at her, and she used to hit me with a belt, and it was on the bottom. Like, it wasn't, that aggressive stuff that you're talking about. And my dad, on the other hand, he was pretty aggressive. Like, he was what you were saying, kicks to the chest, kicks to the head. Luckily, I was the youngest. My brother and sister suffered the brunt of it, and I think they suffered the most mental damage out of it. But personally, now that I'm a father, I made it my life's goal to be the best dad that I could be. And I've never raised my hand to DJ. He's 6. God knows there have been times where I just wanted to, give him a spanking. But basically, I get like flashbacks of when I was a kid. And I say, to me, it's like there's a different way of handling this where I can try and make it impactful to him so that I don't have to hit him. And mainly it's because I think I'll harbor guilt feelings. And that's my question to you. Do you ever have guilt feelings, after you spank your kids? I mean, I'm just curious. So,
I mean, it's been so long since I spanked him. I mean, my 10-year-old has autism, so that can be a challenge in itself. He's high functioning, meaning like he doesn't have all the social issues, but he struggles academically. So honestly, I don't remember the last time. It's probably been 5 or 6 years. So, I mean, I'm sure I have more guilt when I lose my temper on them for something stupid.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
literally, like I try to be like, this is the size of the problem. And I reacted like this, and it's just like, that's where I feel the guilt. Like, oh man, I handled that so poorly. But one thing that I have tried that I think is super impactful is circling back with your kids. Go to them and say, hey, I effed up. Like, I'm not excusing it, but I'm sorry. And that's one thing I am very prideful of is like when I do mess up, I always circle back and say, I'm sorry. I'm going to try to work on this. I'm not expecting you to forgive me right away, or I'm not looking for an excuse, but I just wanted to let you know that I messed up and I'm sorry. And so yeah, as far as guilt, not so much with the spanking, but definitely with the overreaction for silly things.
I think circling back is very important because in this part of the world, also you'll notice that parents, because it's first it's a patriarchal society, but also the idea that there is these like ranks where, but parents, I mean, I'm not going to say all the parents, but maybe the younger parents, no, but the older parents have this tendency to believe that I am not going to apologize to my kid. No, yes, I overreacted. Maybe I shouldn't have smacked them. Maybe there is some guilt feeling, but they don't really go about apologizing because they think that is going to demote them as parents. And so it's interesting that you're saying that because I think what you're trying to say or what you're saying is that going back and saying to my kid, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have overreacted. A, it makes them feel that you're not perfect. And B, it makes them understand that I am also human, that I do have triggers. And then these triggers kind of will, affect me. And by you apologizing, it really helps them connect to you. And it's something we don't do here a lot.
Yeah, I want my kids, I'm hopeful as I have a young daughter that's a teenager, and that has been a challenge so far. She's a lot like me. She has the spitfire from me and the compassion from her mother. But I want her to be able to come to me when she's struggling. And if I'm this mean parent and lose my temper and just don't say anything and just like deal with it, like how is she ever going to come to me if I'm not going back to her and saying, hey, listen, I messed up. And I'm hopeful that they will continue that when they have kids or even in their young adult life, that they say, hey, to their friends, hey, I totally messed up. I'm sorry. Because man, how great is that when someone circles back to you and says that, and you're just like, oh, that meant so much that you cared enough to come back and say that you were sorry.
Also the anger, earlier you mentioned that one of the things that have, that all this abuse have contributed was and also Mehdi was saying this, the anger. Mm-hmm. So what did you do with that anger? How did that anger affect you?
Yeah, I mean, I talked about the losing the jobs. I mean, most of it was verbal. I have worked in the lawn fertilization agriculture for about 20 years. And here in Michigan, we get snow in Chicago, like you said. So we've got a lot of snow in the last 6 weeks. So I don't think I'll be starting on time this year. There's a lot of snowpack here in Michigan, but so I would get laid off every year. And so I would do side jobs and I worked in a lot of restaurants and I have a high work ethic. I don't know where that came from, but I have a high justice value and high work ethic. So I would go into these restaurants and be a server and I'd be working with these 20-year-old girls and guys, but mostly girls that I did not like people being lazy. And I would call them out on it. And, oh my gosh, you would thought I hit them, but management did not tolerate that. And I get that, but I get fired from jobs all the time just because you can't do that in the real world. And maybe that's why I work by myself. I do lawn fertilization. I load my rig up in the morning and I'm by myself all day. And I don't know, it's a perfect job for me because while I love people, I don't like people's crap. And I think that kind of can put me in a poor position when I can be upset. But yeah, I mean, the anger just came out in verbal abuse to people, my loved ones. And I'm still working on that. Honestly, it's still a work in progress.
So just out of curiosity, what are some of the tricks that you have used to manage your anger a lot better? I mean, Dr. D gave me a bunch of tools back in college. I mean, I'm sure, Dr. D, you remember me telling you the stories about me pulling a guy out, throwing him on his windshield and almost busting his face open for cutting me off in traffic.
Oh, boy.
And Dr. D was like, she was sitting there across from me. She's like appalled. And she for a moment, it looked like she was kind of scared, but she was like, look, you just need to really calm down, count to 10, take a deep breath, and just kind of really try to compose yourself at that moment to not do something you're going to regret later. And it was the words regret later that stuck with me and really got me to hone in. Yes, we all know the finding the bear in the cave and calming down and counting till 10, breathing deeply. But for some of us, key words work better. And for me, it's regret later. That I don't want to go home and feel bad for harming someone. Just like you said, the other day I blew up at my kid the same way you're talking about for the smallest, stupidest thing. And I sat DJ down. I said, DJ, look, I'm really sorry, buddy. I handled that so badly. And I'm really sorry. I was trying to fix this while you were crying. The dog was crying and I just lost it, buddy. My apologies, man. What can I do to make you feel better? And he gave me a hug and said, Daddy, thank you. That's all he said. And it was like, and I told Hey all night, I was like, I feel terrible. I feel terrible. But what were some of the tools that you used to channel that anger or, stop it from happening and channel it somewhere else? Dr. D hates that I use displacement, but I always use my anger towards, hitting a punching bag or working out really hard, sort of punishing myself. But what were your tricks, man?
I wish I could tell you that I had tricks. I don't, and I'm still looking for them. I just don't have anything. So I think a lot of my issue is a general anxiety. Now, when I say I have anxiety, I don't have the typical definition of anxiety where you have panic attacks and stuff, but I'm just always edgy. It's just this, line of edginess. And I have taken medication and that has helped. And recently I have started using cannabis as an anxiety reducer, and that's been super helpful. One of the problems with cannabis, though, is the stigma of it, especially in the United States, in the state of Michigan, it's just become legal, which is great, but there's a lot of stigma.
Really?
Yeah. It's the greenest state in the United States. You can have so much pot on you if you want. I try not to use pot because that's the stigma I'm trying to get around from, but you can have a ton of cannabis on you. You can grow it, all that other stuff. But so that's what I've been using. Even before it was legal, I was using it, but now I feel less guilty. Or not guilty, but I can talk about it and I can't get in trouble for it. Now it is still illegal federally, but whatever. But so that has been helped. But unfortunately, getting past the stigma of using it for that. So yeah.
When did you realize that you really needed to seek help, or when did you realize you needed mental help?
I think it honestly was like late teens, early 20s. My mom had, the funny part of all of this is we all went to therapy as long as I can remember. And my mom, right now she has Alzheimer's dementia, so she's obviously not going to therapy, but we all went to therapy, but it was just a shit show. Like, it was like, what? Nothing's working here. Why are we even wasting the money or the time? But yeah, I can say that I felt that I needed help in my late teens, and I went off and on. But one thing I would love for your listeners to hear, and we talk about a lot on our podcast, is you might find a therapist that just doesn't work. And that's okay. And don't spend a ton of time with them. 2 or 3 visits. If you don't have the chemistry and it's not going to work, just bail. I experienced that a lot. I could not find a therapist that just jived with me and understood me for me until maybe, I don't know, 5 years ago. So yeah, I've been off and on therapy since as long as I can remember, but it's only been impactful for the last 5 years. And going to therapy, if you're not ready to work on it, don't even waste your money. Don't even waste your money or your time, because it's not going to work.
No, and I appreciate you saying that, because I oftentimes tell my clients the same thing. Look, it's a relationship, not only for the client, but for me too. If I don't like you, and there's no chemistry here either, then I'm not going to it's going to be a disservice. And I tell people that it's a relationship. You have to like me. I have to like you. And the idea is that, and we also, as therapists, we have to also understand that there are certain issues. We have triggers and we're human beings. And yes, we've worked on our stuff, but there are certain triggers that we have to be aware of. And unfortunately, there are a lot of therapists out there that are not well trained, and they take any case and anything because it's become more of a materialistic kind of more of money producing. And also for the client, because they don't know, especially this part of the world, as I was saying earlier to you, is that, psychotherapy just became a trend. It's not something that we've been doing for a while. I've been in this country for 16 years. I came 2005 to teach. And then, of course, I'm licensed in the States, so I got to keep up my license, and I need to practice, and I want to practice. And I just realized that people, even 16 years ago, they were just starting to get used to the idea of coming to talk about things. And I think you said 2 points. One is people really need to understand that they have to like their therapist. Don't force yourself to like the therapist. Mm-hmm. If you feel the therapist is judgmental, or if you feel like you can't talk about certain things with your therapist, then this is not the right therapist, because you are paying money to come and hear. It's pretty expensive. And the other thing is that you have to be ready. There are a lot of times people come to see me because their parents told them, or because their husband and wife told them, and they're not ready, and it's not going to work. And I think you're right. They have to be ready, and they got to like their therapist.
Yeah, you bring up the money thing. This is how much therapy is important to me. My therapist, and as being in the States, that the health system here is a joke. Like, yes, this is a great country to live in, and I wouldn't want to live anywhere else. But I tell you what, it's a joke. And my therapist worked under she was in a group with 10 people, let's say. And I had insurance through a certain insurance company. And then she said, "Oh, I want to go on it myself." Well, the insurance company said, "Oh, by the way, we're not going to cover you anymore." And she's like, "Well, what do you mean? Nothing changed. I'm just doing my own thing now." So I pay cash for my visits. I love her so much that I don't even use my insurance. I just pay cash for it. So, I mean, when I go every week, it's $500 a month. So it's so important to me to do it that I'm willing to spend that money. So I just wanted to throw that out there. But I have actually a question for you. And what country are you from again? I'm sorry.
We're from Kuwait.
Kuwait, yeah.
Half Kuwaiti, half American.
Okay.
Lived half my life in the States, the other half over here after the invasion.
Yeah.
Dr. D was born in Kuwait, right, Dr. D?
Right,
yep.
That's right.
Yep,
That's
and then she moved to the States, and then she moved back here.
Okay.
It's kind of like, what's that big mafia movie? Once I get out, they pull me back in again. That's what we did with Dr. D.
So they say. It's true. Once you're here, you never leave.
I guess my question to you, why do you think it's becoming, getting help and mental health is becoming more available? Do you feel like it's the internet, as these young kids are being able to connect with other people around the world, that they're like, this is crap. We need to do better?
One of the things is probably social media, where, long time ago, maybe even before. Well, I remember when I was here, when I was born here, obviously my parents were here. When I was, I'm much older than both of you. So when I was here, the idea is that there were only 2 channels. So we weren't really introduced to a lot of kind of Western mentality. And then, of course, the cable came in, and OSN and of our social media. More and more, for example, my students, more and more of them are very influenced by American culture, American media, American music, and they see a lot of episodes, they see a lot of movies, they see psychologists in them. They're becoming much more educated. We here do a lot. I mean, a lot of psychiatrists and psychologists are almost all of them are trained in the West. mainly in the US or Canada. So they come back and they bring in a lot of that idea. We do a lot of education on our social media platform. So I think more and more people are aware that this is okay. This is nothing to do with stigma. I mean, when I first came here, people were thinking that psychologists and psychiatrists see crazy people, which is not true.
Oh,
And there was not a lot of psychiatrists or psychologists in private practice. Now there are more. People are more. You know, what I noticed is that parents would be willing to bring their kids, because we also have, don't forget, we also have a lot of American and British educational system here. So of course that culture is embedded in the kids. So they didn't have a problem bringing their kids, but they would have a problem coming as couple, for example, or as individual. But there are a lot more awareness happening now that it didn't really happen 20 or 30 or even 40 years ago. People back then, they talked to elderly, they kept their problem in the family. You know, remember, we're a collectivist society. So they felt like taking your problem to a stranger, you're shaming the family, you're talking behind your family back, you know, especially if it's your parents' abuse or sexual abuse or anything. And now they're realizing, they're understanding confidentiality, they're understanding the need to talk. We are here, we're doing a lot more, you know, education on mind body. And how your physical is affected by your mental and how your mental is affected by your physical. So as we connect it to physical, more and more people are open to therapy. But if you just leave it as a mental problem, then people are not going to come to see you. Yeah.
Interesting. So you're taking the approach of whole body, and that seems to be more impactful than just the mental health.
Yes.
That's interesting. Yeah, you talk about the stigma, and again, on our podcast, we talk about.
Yeah, that's what I was saying, that, you know, we need to do that because people think it's stigma if you're crazy if you go to a therapist.
Yeah, like I was saying with our podcast, it's just two guys, and our goal for our podcast is just to be okay with men. And I think men struggle most, American men, to go to therapy. And we always say we peer pressure our guests to go to therapy in a loving way, of course, just to be like, this is super important. You need to do it. And even my co-host, Ben, from the episode 1 to 116, it's so cool because if you listen to all the episodes, he was anti-therapy starting at episode 1. And on 116, he's like all in. Like, it's amazing. Yeah. And so our goal is to let people listen to our show and be like, these are just regular dudes and talking about, I mean, yeah, we talk about feelings. It's not like, you know, we're crying on the show or anything, but we want to make it so that it's okay. It's okay as a male to be like, this sucks. I need some help. You know, let's go get some help.
I think you're right. And that's the biggest stigma men have. And I think that's what is in our society, especially within, I mean, we have several different populations within the populations here in Kuwait. You have the very traditional families still that completely don't believe in psychology. They think they can pray the badness out of them. Literally, they will say, I will pray the badness out of me.
It's true.
And, you know, it's one of those things where we need, and they make up the majority of the population right now, and they need to come to grips, and they're slowly getting there with the educational side and more westernization and everything. But, you know, that stigma of being a guy and don't cry in public, you know, like, it's still very real in Kuwait, and it's still very real that, you know, you're a man, you shouldn't cry. You know, even my dad growing up, what are you doing? What are you, a little baby? You're a man, you shouldn't be crying. I was like 9 years old. It's like, dude, give me a break. You know, when I look back at it, it's like, You're a 9-year-old. If you have an emotion, you let that emotion out. And, you know, when my kid cries now, I'm like, all right, DJ, dude, just cry it out. And then, you know, let's move past it. You know, unless he's crying over something really stupid. I'm like, dude, come on, man. You're really going to waste your tears on that, buddy? You're not going to get gummy bears out of me. You know, so it's one of those things. But
yeah,
how's the United States? I haven't been in the States I haven't lived in the U.S. for a while now. I'd say probably about 10 years. And I'm sure a lot's changed. And we were talking about that earlier on the show about
me too.
the laws with children and how you can't even... I remember last I was there, you couldn't even yell at your kid in public without being like reported or something crazy. And, you know, now it's gotten so overboard, and you can really kind of attach the whole emotional side too, because if you got kids that have bottled up emotions, parents that have bottled up emotions, it's a recipe for disaster. But I mean, from the dad's perspective, what do you see other guys doing right now? Like, are they cooler with expressing their emotions, and how are they towards their children's emotions?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to tell. Well, I have a close-knit friendship. I don't see them, interact with their kids a lot. But I would say the general vibe is better. Now, you are right. You did talk about, and I talked about earlier in the show, like people are kind of oversensitive when someone yells at their kids. But man, when I'm in the store and I hear a mom yell at her kid, I'm like, thank God she yelled at her kid. Like that kid was being a complete a-hole and needs to be straightened up. You know what I mean? And maybe I have a different mentality. While I'm sensitive to the child for getting yelled at, if I was there and hearing when I was in the store and hearing the interaction, I feel bad for the parent or, just because they're dealing with that. But as far as dads go, I mean, I feel like it's better than what it was. I can't imagine if I was around one of my friends and the kid was crying and the dad yelled at him to stop crying. I would be like, what are you doing? Like, take it down a peg. And I would hope my friends would do that the same to me and be like, hey, man, it's time to stop doing that. In fact, like 10 years ago, I had a friend, or there was like a family friend, and he treated his kid so bad. We said some things like not physically abusive. We ended up ending the friendship. Like I just stopped hanging out with him because it was just, he just didn't understand that you can't be doing that, belittling them when they're crying. I mean, that's just ridiculous.
That makes total sense. And here's my question to both of you, too. I personally think there's a right way to yell at your kids, and there's a completely wrong way to yell at your kids. There's the way of, when DJ does something like, dude, chill out, man. What's wrong with you, buddy? You got to settle down. You can't do that. That's how I react.
Okay.
Then there are the parents like, oh, my God, what is wrong with you? Is there something wrong with you? Are you stupid? That is when I'm like, that parent need to be bitch slapped, in my opinion. Even if the kid is completely wrong, doing it that way as opposed to doing it in a way where you get them to understand a little bit like, dude, what's wrong with you? Come on, man, settle down. You don't have to do it like that. Or why would you do something like that? This is going to... I try to explain the repercussions as I'm reprimanding them versus what the fuck's wrong with you? Are you stupid? That drives me up the wall because it's like, dude, if you're calling your kid stupid, you're fucking stupid too because you're the person who raised them.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that was just my 2 cents. And I wanted to get your thoughts, both of your thoughts on that.
Going back to what that parent, if I heard that parent do that, my jaw would drop. Like, that's not the yelling I'm okay with. Like, I might go up to them. I might go up. Like, I would let one go, but if it kept continuing, I'm one of those guys. I'm that guy that would be like, hey, man, this is not cool. And honestly, if they're doing that in the store, what are they doing at home?
Yeah.
Like, they're probably like reeling it back a little bit in the store. And if that's what they're doing. So, yeah, I don't think that's appropriate by any means. I love that you said that you were explaining the consequences as you were reprimanding them. Mm-hmm. Honestly, I don't have a ton of experience with it because my kids are really good. Like,
you're lucky, man.
So blessed. I mean, yeah, my daughter again has, she's the teenage angst, and that's been a little challenging. But yeah, I mean, as far as reprimanding them, you cannot yell at them. You can't call them stupid. Oh man, while you were explaining to me about, that guy saying that to that kid, like I was actually triggered. I felt my blood pressure go up a little bit when you were saying that. I'm like, I'm going to kill that guy.
Sorry about that, man. I want to trigger anything.
No.
Dr. D.
No, and I think, the point of the matter is that I don't really think trying to reprimand your kid is bad. And I think it's our job to be able to set limits and boundaries. But I think there's a difference between identifying the behavior and calling the person. And I always with my kid or with parents that I work with, 2 things you got to be able to is recognize what they did wrong and to make sure you qualify it is the behavior that you just did. I don't like it. It has nothing to do with you. Because I think Jason can speak more about that, is that, or even Mahdi's situation, feeling of abuse. But I mean, my mom was emotional abuse. My mom had like these rages, she just everything was intensified. Everything was extreme and it was never talked about. And then as a child, and maybe that's why I became a psychologist, is that I started to realize that, and for me, I was the good kid because I was a straight A. I was democratic all the way, bureaucrat. I knew diplomacy. I don't know where I learned it, but I knew my older sisters, they got it because they were always feisty. So I knew I'm not going to be feisty. I'm going to get the good grades. I'm going to do this. I kind of learned. And I don't think it's fair for a kid to learn how to be diplomatic. So that way their parents don't scream at them. For me, what I teach parents is look, they're going to do bad behaviors. Yes. And that bad behavior should be recognized as bad, not that you are stupid. The behavior you did was not a good behavior. It's not something we do in this household. So always qualifying the behavior. So that way the kid doesn't grow up believing they're stupid or they're crazy or that there's something wrong with them. Because I think this is what a lot of these kids that suffer from low self-confidence or depression or even suicidal thoughts come from the idea that I'm not loved because my mom is always yelling at me. My mom is always hitting me because I'm such a bad person. But there's nothing wrong with the kid when they do something wrong. I don't care what age they are. We should let them know that their behavior was wrong. It's not that they are bad people. And if parents can do that, I think we can minimize at least the lack of confidence and poor self-image and worth and all that. Because I don't know, Jason, but don't you think one of the biggest things that happened maybe to you is that the more you were abused, the more you felt like you were a bad person. So your confidence was, not good.
Yeah. I feel like my sisters got more of the confidence thing because like right now as a 44-year-old man, I'm confident. Like,
of course. Now you are. We're talking when you were a kid.
Yeah. I don't know. Like maybe I always felt like you said, I always felt like I screwed up. Like I was the reason that I was getting beat, and
that's right.
That sucks. And yeah, it definitely, I felt that as a kid, but early on in my adulthood, I started gaining confidence and I don't know where that came from, but my sisters, I would say, took the brunt of the emotional abuse. I honestly, just to give you, like, I have a sister that has an eating disorder at 42 and is probably not going to make it till she's 50. I got one that just lives this lie of a life and tells everyone it's fine, but I know it's completely effed up. I'm probably the most normal one out of all of us, which is a freaking miracle. But yeah, I feel bad for my sisters. I know they took a lot of the emotional abuse and but as far as confidence, I feel pretty good now.
Right. But I think when we keep on calling the kid, you're stupid, you're crazy, you deserve, you make me mad. What bothers me is when parents says, well, he made me mad. That's why I hit him. No, you are responsible for your reaction. Yes. I'm sorry. And everyone needs to take responsibility for their reaction. And so idea here, you find it that are like, no, but he pissed me off. The school called me and he did something really bad. Okay. But maybe you should have a conversation about why you hit him instead of just hitting him. You know what I mean? I think parents get so rage that they forget the reason why they're hitting their kids. So I'm totally against that. But I'm not against, spanking is not a bad thing. You spank them on their hands, you spank them on their butt. It depends on the age, of course, we're talking about. But, with your teenager, for example, spanking is not going to work or hitting is not going to work. What works is a communication.
Yeah.
Cut the money off with your teenagers. That's what you do. You just cut their allowance. That always worked with me. That got me in shape real fast when I was a teenager. Like when my dad was like, all right, you're just not getting your allowance. I'm like, dude, come on, man. And then that would shape me up, to be honest with you, because I knew the repercussions. It's like, all right, I can still go out on the weekends, but I won't have money, and that worked with me. And, my dad, when I was a teenager, wasn't around most of the time. So I couldn't get abused at that time. A lot of it happened when I was a child. So, again, it wasn't directly at me. It was more towards my brother and sister. I got it sometimes, but nowhere near as bad as them. Just out of curiosity, do you think your confidence may come because of your adversity as a young kid? So always being put up against the wall, stacked against you. And Dr. D knows this about me. I love being the underdog.
Yeah.
So I'm just kind of curious. Do you think is the underdog story something that you ring a bell to also? Or is it, did you just gain it from, what is it, man?
Yeah, I love the underdog. We watched the Super Bowl. I used to be like really into sports and not so much anymore. I love podcasting. I love hanging with my family. There's other things that are more important. But we watched the Super Bowl and I love Tom Brady. He's from Michigan. He played at Michigan and he's scrappy, right? He didn't even go in the draft. Like it was crazy.
Hey, man, I'm a New England fan. I'm from Boston. Like my American side's from Boston. So I lived with Brady. It broke my heart when he left. And I said, watch this son of a bitch win another Super Bowl. Watch it happen. And sure enough, he did.
Well, the second he got traded, I said to myself, if he wins a Super Bowl, like I wasn't even expecting the first year. I'm like, if he wins a Super Bowl for Tampa Bay, I don't care what anyone says. He's the best quarterback ever to live.
There's no argument.
There's no argument. But going into the Super Bowl, Tampa Bay was the underdog. And my wife, we're watching the Super Bowl and she's like rolling her eyes. I'm like, why are we doing this? And I'm like, come on, it's the Super Bowl. You got to watch the Super Bowl. And she's like, who are you voting for? Tampa Bay. She's like, oh, you always vote for the underdog. You always go for the underdog. And I'm like, yeah, I always go for the underdog because that's the story there, right? They come from behind. No one gives them credit. And that's kind of how I look at myself. I'm like, look what I become. I could have gone a terrible path like you talked about earlier. You could have took a path that could have ended you in jail or whatever, and I could have took that same path. And while it was bumpy getting there, I didn't take that path. So I always have that underdog mentality, being scrappy, and I think that's what brings my confidence. And obviously the therapy helped too. I mean, without the therapy, I'm dog shit right now. I'm still dealing with all this stuff and I owe it all to therapy. And I just can't say enough about it, but I will always vote for the underdog. If I'm betting any money, it's always going to be the underdog. Always.
Same here, man. Same here. 100%. But I mean, before it'd be the Red Sox would always be the underdog. But now if you're from Boston, I hate to say it to everybody out there. If you're from New England, you're not really the underdog with all them championships we've had in the past 20 years. So, we've been sitting pretty for the past 20 years. But before, growing up a Red Sox fan, it was like Red Sox were always the underdogs whenever they made it to postseason. And personally, growing up, I was a scrapper. I was a shorter kid, a lot smaller. And got into a lot of fights, all that stuff. But yeah, it's something that I think people with a troubled childhood can relate to, of being put down for so long. And then when you overcome those odds, there's an affiliation you have with someone that has less of a chance of making it. That's just my personal take on it. And dude, don't take anything away from yourself. I have a tremendous amount of respect just from talking to you for the past 50 minutes for you to come where you are right now. Therapy always helps us, but at the end of the day, it's ourselves that does most of the work. No offense, Dr. D, but
no, but I think what Jason is saying is that he had resiliency. And I think with therapy, it gave him the support that he needed to be able to bring that resiliency out. I mean, we all have, Mehdi and I, we talked about this psychological immune system that, people that are underdog, people that have gone through trauma, people that have gone through a lot tend to develop, but maybe they don't tap into it. And maybe mental health really has helped him. But what I admire the most, Jason, is that you've started this podcast to really bring awareness. And I think this is amazing, especially when you said about men. I think you're right. I think men in the US, at least in the US, they are somehow a little bit seeking therapy. Here, definitely they don't. Because here is like that machismo, if you want to think about like that Latin kind of a behavior, that collectivist idea that I'm supposed to be strong. They're taught from the beginning, you don't talk about your emotions. You're the breadwinner. You're the one supports the family. So going to a psychologist in their mind is like they're becoming vulnerable and weak. And that's not one of their characteristics of what they've been brought up to. So I think it's great because I think your resiliency, your ability to talk about this, it's really good. And to do it, to bring awareness to men. I think that's amazing.
Yeah, one of the things that is interesting in the States, and as much as I tease millennials, and that's always the meme, millennials, whatever, they're doing their mental health work as much as we tease them. And so I'm a Gen Xer, so it's kind of going to end with us, I think, that I'm helping Gen Xers, like the boomers. Oh my gosh, forget about it. Trying to get one of them to go, even my mother-in-law, I wanted her to go to therapy and, she's like, it's just that attitude of the boomers is you just don't do that, which I can respect it. I mean, if you don't get it, you don't get it. I'm not going to be upset about it. But yeah, I think the millennials are really going to turn the mental health game around. And especially as they go into their work life, and some of these companies are really taking it seriously, which I'm excited for, being able to have a mental health day or supporting somebody that's dealing with mental health issues. So yeah, we're trying to get the Gen Xers, the male Gen Xers, to be like, hey man, it's okay. I know you're rough and tough and,
Don't you think they're going overboard a little bit? Just a little bit, just a tad overboard with cry closets? Come on. There does have to be a level of mental toughness. What if, all right, Dr. D.
What are you talking about?
Look, the world is going to need underdogs, all right, one day to kick ass.
They can still be in therapy, mental.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying the cry closet. I'm saying there is a level of going overboard right now with a lot of this stuff. even in the States, I mean, right now, before freedom of speech, you don't have freedom of speech in the States anymore. Like, that doesn't exist.
We never even had that. That was just a delusion.
An illusion. Yeah. Like, you say something about anybody nowadays, you know, you could be prosecuted, sued, you could be all kinds of stuff, you know, and, you know, just with like, I agree, mental health is so important, but having cry closets and just, you know, I think there's a little bit of a level of going overboard, and we tend to go overboard with these things a little too much at times. And then when we see all the, you know, the negative side effects from it, it's like, oh shit, what do we do? And then it's too late to kind of turn back time to being so sensitive to certain things. I'm not saying, and I want to be very clear, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with, you know, having emotion towards psychological well-being. I'm just saying that there is a level, like, give every kid a trophy. You know, like, how are you going to distinguish winners and losers?
Go in, Jason. Jason, tell him.
Okay, so Dr. D, you're not going to like this, but I agree with DJ.
Oh my God.
No,
I do.
I'm Maddie. DJ's my son.
Oh, sorry.
It's got
Maddie.
my kid's name on the Zoom, DJ.
It's okay. We
But it's
agree
all
with
right.
DJ.
It's all good.
Well, I agree with him too, because he's probably got his shit together.
DJ does have his shit.
Yes.
With me as a dad, he's
He
got his
does have
shit
his
together,
shit
definitely.
He's got exactly.
So I have to agree with you because I don't know what a cry closet is, but that sounds ridiculous. I am talking about just seeking out mental health. Like, I assume a cry closet is somewhere at the corporation. You can go in there and cry. I get it. You have to have some toughness. I hate the trophy mentality. It pisses me off to no end. Like, why are we even doing this sport or this activity if everyone's going to get treated the same? I mean, because you're right. That's what makes scrappers. That's what, you know, yeah. Okay. You sucked at T-ball, but you're good at soccer, or, you know, vice versa. So I'm sorry, Dr. E. I have to agree with him for the most part, but I'm just talking. I like the millennials being open about talking about their mental health. I
agree. I agree with that. I agree with that part 100%. They brought awareness.
No, hold on a minute. I'm not saying that everyone needs therapy. Of course, I'm not saying that. And I'm not saying that people should not be. That's what I'm talking about, resilience. People that have gone through a lot have built this resilience that they can help themselves. I mean, look at COVID. With COVID-19, a lot of people were able to tap into their resiliency. They used their social support. They got online and started to connect. They learned new skills. You should see my students. I mean, here we are, a very collectivist society. We love to be with people. Suddenly we're on 6 months of curfew time, different times, but curfew. There were times we couldn't leave the house. These people that were resilient were able to adapt, while other people have become depressed and anxious. So I'm not saying that is not. But I'm not saying mental health has to be a one-on-one. Like, they use their social support system in whatever way. They got into these like online support group. They learned a skill. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying that everyone needs to, and that everyone needs to learn to be a sore loser. The idea is that mental health, when something is becoming more than you can handle, you have to seek therapy. Like sometimes, I mean, like Mehdi was saying earlier, that people here will go to a religious person before they'll come to a psychologist because they think that you might be possessed, because we're still into that mentality, right? Not the majority, but there is a minority. Now, the idea is that they'll wait 2 years or 3 years or 4 years where their depression, their panic attack, anxiety has gone so bad. And then they'll come to me or to a psychiatrist, and they want to be cured in 2 or 3 sessions. Now, that's impossible. I'm not a miracle worker because they've waited so long. I don't want people to wait so long. So we wait a little bit. We see how long we can handle. When things are getting so bad, we're not going to work. We're skipping classes. You know, we're crying all the time. Our family is becoming worried about us. We're thinking about killing ourselves. No, we need to think of suicide. We need to think of mental health support. I mean, it's not black and white. There's, you know, sometimes I need to handle my own stuff. I'm not calling a therapist every time a crisis is happening to me, even if I am a therapist. But when I know when things get bad and I need someone to listen to me, it's the support. And I think people really need to differentiate, and also to realize it's nothing wrong with going to a therapist. That doesn't make you weak.
Yeah. If anyone ever said to me, you were weak for going to a therapist, I'm like, all right, let's fight. We'll find out.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Exactly. I mean, here, like, I hate telling people what I do for a living. As soon as you're in a gathering and you say I'm a psychologist or a therapist, whatever, and they're like, oh, you see crazy people? Oh, no.
No.
Like, I hate that comment. It pisses me off. I think I have anger issues with that. And I'm like, no, I see people normal like you and me. Like, this idea of like, I have to be crazy to seek you. Until then, I'm going to deal with it by myself. That's wrong also.
Yeah.
So no, I don't agree with you, Mahdi. And Jason, now you're going to be on the blacklist.
Oh, no.
Just kidding. Just kidding.
Dr. D, you never agree with me. You absolutely never.
I never agree with him.
That's what makes this show so beautiful. I attack it from a completely different perspective.
Attack me, he does.
You know, I mean, she's gotten mad at me because I do say sometimes you can't be emotionally weak. Like, and I think weakness right now is thriving in our society.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that exists from the wussification of the world. We are turning into wussies. And my wife will kill me for saying that statement, but it's fine. It's fine. I'll take it. But the wussification of everything is putting us in a really compromising position as a society, because I do not think we will have the people and the leaders capable of taking us forward if they are always afraid of what happened and what's going to happen. If you don't have leaders at the helm, you're not going to make it anywhere. And how are you going to generate leaders if everyone's getting a trophy and everyone's getting a pat on the back and what about when they go in for a job interview and they don't get the job?
Yeah.
How are they going to handle that? It's going to destroy them. It's going to absolutely destroy them mentally when they don't get their first job interview. But that's life. You get cut from baseball and football teams. You don't get that trophy. And Jason, I mean, come on, in the States right now, every kid gets a trophy. Every kid gets picked for the team. Every kid in class gets a certificate for whatever it is. And it's like, all right, but what's the difference between last place and first place now?
Yeah.
You really need to distinguish, I'm going home crying because I don't have anything at 7, versus every kid, I'm going to have a certificate. If my kid shows me a trophy and he came in like 5th place, I'm going to be like, DJ, look, buddy, first place gets the best trophy. They're just giving you this to make you feel good. I'll tell them the truth. And, and that's just my perspective on it, because it just sucks. Sorry.
I love this topic, honestly. I'm like, how do you think that this has started? Like, where was the switch? And honestly,
Parents started.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, I was a baseball coach for 15 years. And before, parents had a certain say in the league and with coaches and everything. And then parents started getting more involved and more authority was given to parents. And then all of a sudden, teams were being picked based on the parents. Being a coach, they're like, no, you have to take this kid because so-and-so parent. I'm like, I don't give a shit about their parent. I give a shit about putting the best team on the field.
Right.
And, I think it just goes back to the parents. When the parents complain, schools, institutions overreact. And when they overreact, the teachers like Dr. D, I'm sure you get a lot of this in AUK.
Yeah, and I don't allow
or,
it.
in your university.
Yeah.
Where parents will complain to the upper echelons, then you get pressure.
Yeah.
It all started with the parents. They thought they were doing something good for their kids. And now I think it's snowballed into the institutions not knowing what to do and overdoing it with every single aspect of sports, academia, debate club, all of it, man. I mean, I just think right now it's just heightened and we're shooting ourselves in the foot.
Do you feel that that's just like that in the States or in Kuwait too? That's kind of happening.
I think it's all over.
I mean, here it does happen. Although here we're a culture that loves competition, though. Here in schools, we do. Actually, in a lot of, especially government schools here, they rank you according to your rank. So because according to the percentage that you got. So the system here is like you take all these exams when you're a senior, you've got a percentage, and that percentage gets you into like an engineering school, a medical school, whatever. So you have to have a high percent. So the kids are ranked anyways, who's the highest, who's according to their GPA. But you're right. I think so with schools, it's not like they can do it that much because we're more concerned about GPA. But I get students all the time that haven't done their work. I mean, just now, we just finished a semester. I have these kids, these students. I had difficult family problem. I have this, I have that. I mean, this person has an F, is asking me for C+. Seriously? I said, why? Why would I give you a C+? And how fair is that to the other students that really got the C+ because they really worked hard? Because you decided not to show up to class. I mean, and didn't show up to class, didn't do a lot of his assignments. And suddenly saying to me, well, I have the circumstances. And I don't know why these circumstances only come after you've already submitted your grades. When we are virtual, they can see their grades online. So he already knew what he was getting. It wasn't a surprise. And I let my students see all their grade book. I don't hide it. So they already know where they stand. And suddenly, but it's not fair. I mean, in the past, I've had parents call me and say, like, it's not fair. My kid is doing this. He's attended your class. Well, attending and participating are two different things. Attending and taking an exam and passing are two different things. I don't allow it. But there are here parents that are like, there are, what would you call them, Mehdi? They're like, prominent in the
Society.
society.
Yeah, they're the upper
Maybe they have a
class.
big name. And sometimes they think that will influence them. But
Yeah.
really, I think here it's a lot more of a competitive society than it is in America, I think.
Maybe academically, but sports-wise, oh my God.
So they like competition here versus in the US. What do you think? But
No, here, like, academia is completely different. Sports-wise, I was in a competition a couple months ago. Jason, listen to this, man. I'm in a competition as a CrossFitter, okay? I'm 37 years old. And I finish, I lose. I'm competing with a bunch of 20-year-olds. I knew what I was getting into. And when I'm done, the guy goes, no, wait for your medal. And I look at him, I'm like, what fucking medal are you talking about, buddy?
Yeah.
I was like, I was in 10th place, man. The only medal I'm getting home is, like, dude, no way, man. Like, what are you talking about? I'm not going to take home a medal of participation.
Right.
And I don't want my son thinking if he, registers for something, he's going to get a medal and that counts. That goes on the trophy wall. Because it doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't go on the trophy wall. So what is it like in the States, though, with you guys now?
I want to go back to Dr. D talking about the parent in the classes. My daughter, who is an A student she's a 7th grader, they get to retake tests for whatever stupid reason. Like, oh, I don't like my grade, I get to retake it. I'm like, she told me that. I'm like,
what?
what?
I was flabbergasted. I'm like, are you an A student because you get to retake the test? Now, she is bright, but I couldn't believe that. I'm like, this is bullcrap. Like, you are so lucky right now because there is no way in hell that would happen when I was a kid. So I totally agree with you, Dr. D. That's crap. I mean, you have to do the work. If you fail, like, I'm sorry, try better next time.
I mean, and I think because I'm a psychologist and they think that I'm empathic, which I am, and I don't mind working with a student. I mean, it is COVID. We do have people have circumstances. I understand, but you can't tell me that after the grades have been submitted and put it on me to be understanding. And he's like, well, you should be more understanding. No, I shouldn't be. I'm sorry. I mean, I am an academic and I have ethics. And no, this will not work with. How can I justify it? Because there are other people that did show up and did the work. But you have parents that interfere. I mean, with me, not a lot, to be honest. Maybe it's my reputation. I'm tough. So parents don't try. But I've had colleagues that have said to me, their parents would call in and say, look, why are you making this difficult? Why can't you give my son a little bit, if they got a D, why can't you move him up to a C minus or whatever? And, our university does not allow that at all. Actually, our university is very strict. Once you submit your grade, unless you can justify why you're changing someone's grade, it is impossible. And this is what the students don't understand. And I say to them, look, it's not up to me. I can't justify. But you're right. I mean, when a parent comes in a university setting and is like saying to a professor, my kid is just as smart as the other person. Why can't you just give them a C or a D? As if like, we pick and choose what to give you.
Right.
That's wrong. So it is the parents. I mean, I tell my student all the time, what are you going to do when you go to a job and it's competitive and they don't hire you? What are you going to do? Have your mom call the person and say, why didn't you hire my son or my daughter? You got to learn the word no. That's it. No means no.
Yeah.
And it's our job. I tell my kids all the time, look, no means no. Doesn't mean maybe, doesn't mean yes. Because if I don't do it, tomorrow they will be shattered. I swear to you. If I don't practice the word no now, and that's what I tell parents, if you don't teach your kid to hear the word no, tomorrow they'll be lost in the real world. They will be.
100% true.
Yeah, we talk about it, and maybe this is worldwide, but there used to be helicopter parents. Well, now there's lawnmower parents. That's what we call them.
Oh, that's what we're calling them, lawnmower. Okay.
Yeah, because they clear the path before the kid even gets to whatever the hardships is going to be. So they're doing all this work beforehand. So they're not just watching them. They're getting making sure everything's clear. So we call them lawnmower parents here.
Oh, I love this word, lawnmower. I'm going to write it. But I know about helicopter because one time my son, who's in the US in a high school there now, but he's like, Mom, you're being too much helicopter, Mom. And I'm thinking, what the hell is that? And then I realize you're being so controlling. Lawnmower. See,
right.
but I'd rather be a helicopter than a lawnmower, to be honest.
Well, yeah, for sure. But yeah, I mean, lawns are
I
big.
mean, either is good, but still,
Yeah.
if I have a choice.
I don't know why. I think because I do lawns, and lawns is big money in the States. Like everyone has a nice lawn. So I know otherwise in the country, they're like, why do you care about your lawn so much? But yeah, lawn more parent. That's the new thing going on. But to answer your question earlier, Maddie, is I definitely think that is a problem. And I feel bad for the teachers, right? Because they're caught between a rock and a hard place. Like I love a teacher that's a badass and it's tough. Like I've had tough teachers for my daughter, and I'm like, I love you so much. Like not tough, but just be like, no, this is what it is. I'm not changing it. Let's move on. And I just feel so bad for a teacher. Like you couldn't pay me enough to be a cop in the United States or a teacher right now, because those are the two toughest jobs.
Yeah,
Yeah,
100%,
that's very
man.
true.
So, dude, real quick as we wrap up, man, how can people find you? What's the name of your podcast? You've talked about it a lot. I don't think you've brought up the name at all. I mean, which is cool, dude. You could go ahead and bring it up and talk about it a little bit for our listeners. Anything that helps people, especially with mental health and whatever. Like, I mean, it's fair game here. So, how can people find you? What's the name of your podcast?
Yeah, thank you for that opportunity. I really appreciate it. I try not to.
I know. I do the same, dude. I do the same.
I might talk about that I have a podcast, but I never say the name until the end because that's just respect.
Yeah.
So it's called Threads Podcast Life Unfiltered. I have a couple of podcasts, but this is the one that I really would love people to go to hear us. And we talk about mental health. We actually have 3 buckets. We talk about, and we've kind of evolved, and I'm sure your show has evolved too. I mean, I think you have like 230 episodes, which is nuts.
Yeah.
So ours has evolved too, but now we're focusing on 3 buckets, which is mental health, faith, and uncomfortable conversations. So each episode, we try to touch on one of those, or we might touch on all of them. So yeah, it's Threads Podcast Life Unfiltered. If you go to threadspodcast.com, that has everything on there.
One is mental health. The other one is faith. What do you guys talk about that before we wrap up? So
I was curious about that one too,
yeah,
Dr.
me
Look
too.
Look at that. We're on the same wavelength over here in Kuwait. At least we agree on that.
Right. So Ben and I are both Christians, and Ben is actually an ordained minister. While he's not practicing, he went to school for youth ministry. So it's super important for him. Well, those buckets I'm not as excited for because I'm kind of a skeptical Christian, I would say. And so I struggle with that stuff. But yeah, that's the faith we kind of talk about. And we have guests on sometimes too to talk about certain buckets and stuff. Yeah.
What kind of a Christian are you, if you don't mind me asking? Are you Baptist?
I am, I guess I would say I grew up CRC, Christian Reformed, but the church I go to is based off Christian Reformed, but it's kind of like come as you are kind of church. You know what I mean? Like I wear jeans and a baseball cap. Obviously I take it off when I pray, but it's no big deal. It's like whatever. And that's the kind of church I like to go to, is just come as you are. Doesn't matter who you are. We want you.
Yeah. Is that like a Baptist type of church or Baptist type of beliefs? I mean,
I think it's more evangelical, right?
Evangelical?
More, not Baptist. It's more evangelical.
All right.
Because
Correct.
Baptist is more, I don't know how to describe it, but more southern states have Baptist.
We
right?
had Baptists in New England. Like my best friend's father was a minister.
Is it a big one?
I wouldn't say so. Man, there's so many different, like, I don't even know about Baptists. I mean, when I think of Baptists, like Dr. D, I think Southern and like hands up and going crazy. But you got Lutherans, you got Baptists, you got Catholics, you got Christian Reform, 7-Day Advents.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
They're
pretty
popular actually in Chicago, 7-Day Advent.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I would say just CRC. I hate saying CRC because the church I went to growing up was CRC, and it was the strictest, most BS church I ever went to. And I have a lot of hypocritical stuff as like being abused as a kid, circling back to the abuse that we've talked about so long, is going to this church. And like, I had to like freaking lie every time, and no one was ever involved in our lives. And man, that could be another story for another day.
And then the third one is uncomfortable conversations.
Like we've had podcasts about abortion. We've had podcasts about drugs, just certain things. We've had guests on that, and it's a broad, uncomfortable conversation, but we like to focus on things that people don't talk about, like, politics, religion, just whatever. The last guest we had on, we talked about, she was abused as a kid. Like she had the worst life, and that's uncomfortable, and like how she's become a badass now and just doing things in life. And so, yeah, we try to sprinkle everything in, but kind of focus on those 3 things.
Awesome, man.
Awesome. This is great. I love educational things, actually. And I think you're touching the three of them, each one of them is touching on something particular that people can benefit from.
I would love to have each of you on the podcast. I think it would be great. I think you guys would fit perfect.
Oh, yeah. Anytime.
Yeah, man.
We love to talk.
Yeah, dude.
So
You might actually get my whole story unfiltered. I've never talked about my uncomfortable childhood.
Really?
Yeah, I've never really dived into it. And I won't dive into it on this show because I got too many friends and family that listen to it. So
yeah, me too.
That's
Me
such a
too.
problem with us too. Like when I talked about the cannabis, like I haven't talked about it on Threads just because I don't want that judgment from people that, even though I don't care, but I do kind of care, right? You know what I mean? So yeah, we'd love to have you on. You can tell whatever you want. So that would be awesome.
yeah, man. No.
I think that's great. Very therapeutic, I think. Isn't it therapeutic when it's unfiltered? Wow, I would love to just say whatever.
Yes, you could. That would be awesome. You can say whatever you want.
Yeah, that's just great. Thank you, Jason.
Awesome, man. Thanks again for coming on the show. We really appreciate it, dude.
Thanks for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed it, please head over to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. You can also find us on Instagram at The Project Thank You, and join us next time.